Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the reading session. I know that no one is here at this moment. I see some notifications about the baby episodes. That's fine. That's fine. You can still come back and watch this back, probably. That's gonna be a thing. Why this is loop so early? I don't know. But I was not here when this was playing. So let's go for some more calming music. Let's see, everything should be fine. Let's continue Boldores and Boomsticks with chapter 25. Maybe later some of you will join, but now we have some stuff to do. Let's just continue, and let me just move into the frame actually. That might be the best idea. Chapter 25. Dance Absolution. O's. James. Greetings complete, the pair of headmasters turned and began to trek across the beacon's campus towards the growing crowd outside the auditorium. The companionable silence went on for a few dozen yards before General Ironwood finally broke into the question. Doesn't Beacon typically hold the White Festival dance earlier in semester, O's? Osprey nodded placidly, his cane tapping along the sidewalk in time with his steps. Typically, yes. This year circumstances that dictated that it be pushed back a bit. The accident that damaged the auditorium forced us to either change the date or find an alternate venue, and the former option was the more viable. Ironwood frowned thoughtfully. Right, I saw the report on that. How did one of your students manage to mistake the main hall for the bullhead landing pads? One of the great mysteries, James. It took a few weeks to get things back in order, and then we needed to push things back a bit more to effect further repairs after the incident with the coffee maker and the fire hose. I think Glenda is not here. I still say you don't need an espresso machine that can fill a 50-gallon drum in 3 minutes, so maybe you should cut back. And maybe perhaps you should stop blaspheming in my temple. At any rate, the dance needed to be pushed back one more time after the unfortunate moment in which Mr. Winchester was overheard saying that Miss Adele had, quote, fat ass, end quote, in the newly repaired auditorium by the young lady in question. At least bullet holes are easy to patch. Is the boy out of protection? For better or worse, he is. One can imagine how he plans to stop himself tonight. The silence returned for another few steps. It really has been surprisingly quiet semester for Beacon, hasn't it? Indeed. If not for the situations of Team RWBY and her occupying my attention, I would consider it quite relaxing. Ironwood snorted. I am almost jealous. My deputy has forwarded the paperwork, needing my signature recording regarding Atlas Academy's dust storage bunker 3 times since this deployment began. I was being quacked and I brought that. The bunker has only exploded 3 times so far. That's actually not bad. Well, I don't like to brag. And speaking of deputies, the general gave his most charismatic smile as Ospin's second in command approached, her habitual scowl deepening in response. Glenda, you are looking magnificent this evening. James! The chair that Professor Goodwin packed into the single syllable was worse than far north of Solitas, but Ironwood maintained his cheer despite it. You were looking here. You are looking here. You're too kind. The soldier said humbly. Before we joined the students though, I did want to ask the two of you about a matter of some importance. Which matter would that be, James? Osborne asked. There are quite a few to choose from a fleet. I've been kept up to date regarding the RWBY situation by both the reports you have forwarded to me and by Specialist Nee more directly. But there is a detail that has been given very little attention in the material I have seen, despite it quite possibly being the most important thing to address. Osborne's face remained politely impassive. Which detail are you referring to? Ironwood frowned at his companion, unimpressed by his blasé attitude. Come off with those. You know what I'm talking about. You have been letting it run all over your campus for over a week now. Ch25? Now, James, I know you and Crow have your differences, but it's highly polite to refer to him as it. No, it's the Absol. I forgot about that. The general stared at him for a moment, before turning to Godwich. Times like this, I honestly can't tell if he's kidding, and that worries me. They didn't rise to the bait. Keeping her own face just as impassive as her superiors, she kept her answer simple and to the point. You are of course referring to Absol. Yes, I am referring to the alien life form you seem to intend on giving full reign over your school. Has it occurred to you the possibility that it could be a threat? That depends on the manner of which you are defining threat, James. Osborne answered calmly. In a fight, certainly, she is a threat. She is a skilled combatant with a variety of natural weapons to make use of, a cunning and tactical mind, and a talent for aura manipulation acquired by a few huntsmen in my acquaintance. But to far full of danger she represents would require going out of my way to provoke such a reaction. She is quite even-tempered that way. Oz. Alien life form. How do you know it? Fine. She isn't some kind of vanguard or scout or something worse. How do you know she isn't a danger to your students? I have no clue what's going on. Well, you haven't been here for a while, I guess. But we are in, just to sum it up really fast, we are in Remnant right now. The world of RWBY. And one of the Pokemon got through a portal. I mean, Team RWBY and the Grimm went to a portal as well to the world of Pokemon. And the Pokemon came through here as well. That's what they are referring to as it or she. Because they don't know what to do with it. I mean, RWBY doesn't know what to do with it. Because it's not even mentioned in the report. Glinda shot him an incredulous look. She set an arm towards a cluster of students, and the quadrupedal form that's not even a hard word though, accompanying them. The gesture clearly containing a silent really? Absol felt pretty. It was an unfamiliar experience, but she did. The dark type had never attended a function like a school dance before, but she could definitely see the appeal of getting dolled up and enjoying a stress-free night once in a while. I get it, just joking around and saying hi. You are welcome. You are welcome here anytime. What can I say except you're welcome? Nah, don't do that. She spent the afternoon meticulously grooming her fur and polishing her claws, horn, and tail with a little help from one of the students who had planned the event to cap things off. She felt like a million berries. That half-full soul grinned down at Absol, resplendent in her own dress that somehow went perfectly with the beret she wore with her usual uniform. "Looking good, Fuzzball," Crocodile praised. "Didn't I tell you that shawl was perfect?" Absol beamed back up at her, smiling broadly at the simple and genuine compliment. It was really the perfect choice, the floral pattern in the shades of grey doing a lovely job to tie her white fur and black beads together, with the garment held together at her throat by a brooch and the same dark red shade as her eyes. The Pokemon felt like she really fit with the evening wear clad attendees. Her offer of loaned accessories had been a delightful surprise, as had been the suggestion to attend the dance in the first place. For the weeks since she had taken an unexpected trip through the portal thing, the student body as a whole hadn't quite known what to make of her, even though they clearly didn't have a clue about the unfair disaster magnet reputation her kind had. I mean, the whole world of Cleveland is a place to disaster, so to be included like this was nice. Absol scanned the crowd, looking for familiar faces. There were Crow and Taeyang, the former slouching against the wall, the latter looking slightly uncomfortable as she was shutted up by a cluster of young ladies, the same age as his eldest daughter. There was Ran, as stoic as imperturbed as his talks, as he was in his normal flowing garments. There was Jean, looking so nervous as he waited for his date that he was likely struggling not to throw up before she arrived. Absol couldn't help but snort at his situation, as if he actually had anything to worry about. She had some laughter and cooing coming from another group of students, and turned to see what had caught the crowd's attention, and was dumbfounded to see Taeyang's dog trotting toward her. He was freshly washed, his fur brushed, he had a bow tie around his neck, and a daisy freshly pulled from some flower bed was in his mouth. Absol stared wide-eyed and incredulous, as Zwei laid the flower in the ground in front of her and sat down, panting at her cheerfully. She barely took any notice of the number of students who had pulled out their scrolls to snap a picture as she tried to process the things. Zwei was a corgi, right? Right? Not just a corgi. Jean was grateful for the adorable distraction Zwei and Absol were providing, but it only took a minute for his anxieties to demand his attention again. His palm was sweaty and mouth spaghetti, and he couldn't stop adjusting his tie, which hadn't seemed too nearly so tight back in his dorm room. The leader of Team Juniper had resigned himself to attending to their stage, I guess. What with Vice being missing, though Jean was honest enough with himself to admit he probably still would have ended up going alone, even if she was present. Somehow though, he had ended up with a date anyway, and he was terrified that he was going to screw things up. How he had ended up in this situation anyway? "If you don't get a date to dance, I will wear a dress," Jean laughed. He headed back inside, still shaking his head over the idea of Pyrrha not getting asked out, as if a girl like her dateless? Ha! She had hundreds of admirers. The only difficulty would be needing to turn down dozens of guys she chose not to go with. Just a few steps away from their rooftop training spot, Jean was surprised by a heavy arm dropping over his shoulders and holding him off the path to Juniper's dorm. "Hey Nichols, I've got to borrow your chew toy for a few minutes," Taeyang called over his shoulder as he half-dragged Jean away. "He will catch up with you later." Jean shot a panicking look over his shoulder at his partner, suddenly fearing for his own safety and sanity. Young and Ruby's father was a fantastic teacher, and his assistance had helped improve Jean's skills as a huntsman immeasurably, but the man seemed to consider his students' mental well-being or sanity to be unnecessary considerations. He caught a glimpse of Pyrrha giving him a worried look before they rounded the corner, but there was little she could do to help him escape, whatever the mad gym teacher had in mind. Yeah, this is different from what really happened. Ark! Darwin began solemnly, as if preparing to grant the sand one of the great truths of the universe. I'm going to do for you what I wish someone had been kind enough to do for me back when I was your age. What's that, Mr. Xiaolong? Zhou asked nervously, barely able to keep from swinging in alarm. He was surprised to feel a companionable arm resting in his shoulders lift up, and even more surprised by the thumb of Darwin's palm on the back of his head, hard enough to send the younger blonde sprawling on the floor. Of course, stupid! Oh yeah, that was how. Zhou had never imagined Pyrrha would say yes to going to the dance with a guy like him, but he really didn't want to tell Taeyang that he hadn't taken his advice, and to the knight's astonishment, his partner's initial surprise at the invitation had immediately given way to joy, and considering the enthusiasm with which she had acquiesced. Wow, that's a word I rarely heard. Zhou had felt like a real dummy that day. Once he was able to think straight once more at least. Talk about missing what was right in front of you. Still, that still led to this moment, as he and Ren waited for Pyrrha and Nora to finish their last preparations and join them, and it was nerve-wracking. Zhou took a deep breath, trying to settle his stomach. It would seem to help slightly, but it was still all he could do to keep his lunch down. Zhou? Pyrrha's voice called from just a few scant yards away. He looked around to face his partner, and stopped, mouth falling open as he barred the vision before him, clad in figure hugging red silk, and look of faint nervousness in her emerald eyes. Quick! Engage the smooth line generator! Warning generator offline. Engaging backup systems. Wow. Stupid backup systems? Well, she was smiling and even blushing a little, so it wasn't a total loss. Zhou wasn't particularly a deep thinker. He was, at least nominally, a warrior. But in that moment, as he looked up upon Pyrrha, he realized he had solved one of the oldest conundrums of philosophy. What is beauty? This was. Ren allowed a trance of amusement to slip through his mask of composure as he watched Zhou's reaction to Pyrrha. He shared a sidelong glance with Nora, and the pair smiled at the sight before Ren offered her his arm. As he complimented his lifelong companion's dress and makeup, he couldn't help but chuckle internally, as he remembered how they had learned of Zhou's sudden recognition of the obvious. Ren sat on his bed, textbook open on his lap, and a few pages of reading for grim studies, and he would be ready to move on to the essay for Oblak's guess. Movement just outside the open door caught his eye, and he looked up just in time to see Pyrrha practically float past, broad smile adorning her face, and looking like she was on cloud 9. Red glanced at Nora, who was lying on her own bed, playing a game on her scroll, to check if she had seen it too. She evidently had, and they exchanged a look that spoke volumes before going back to what they were doing. A minute or so later, Zhou arrived. His hair was even messier than usual, Ren noted, and he looked dazed as he fumbled his way into a seat at one of the room's desks without his eyes focusing on anything at all. He sat there silently, not acknowledging either of the room's other occupants, as he stared blankly into space. Ren and Nora shared another look. As Nora turned attention to her game, she muttered to herself, just loud enough for Ren to hear, "Fucking finally!" The party was in full swing, with the dance floor packed and the music thumping. Abso wound her way through the crowds along the sides of the room, trotting along with her cheerfully. The pest took them over to the cluster of refreshment tables, laid out with variety finger foods, and of course the obligatory massive bowl of punch. Abso was easily tall enough to prop her forepaws on the table's edge, and one of her wickedly sharp claws served to skewer as horse the view, without disturbing the rest of the tray. And as an afterthought, she snapped a second one for Swy. He stared turned with delight as she tossed the cracker sausage cheese thing to him, and he snapped it out of the air. Nearby Crow had stationed himself within a few steps of the punch bowl, and he hadn't moved since. Abso noticed Professor Goodwitch approaching him with a stormy expression, and cocked an ear to listen in. "Crow," the teacher growled, "I'm sure you're not foolish enough to spike the punch." The capped huntsman snorted, and produced his flask from inside his jacket. "Do I look like young?" He opened the container one-handed, and added a splash to the half-full cup of punch in his other hand. "These brats can get their own liquor." Smoking at the typical exchange between her sort trainer and the school's main disciplinarian, Abso dipped into her inborn power for a moment, reading the tapestry of cause and effect, to sense an approach of doom and disaster as much as she could through all the interference that habitually surrounded Beacon, combining hundreds of teenagers, lessons on solving problems with violence, quad with good. Is it quad? Yeah, I think it's quad. Quad living arrangements and large caliber weapon kept things on a constant knife edge between calamity and catastrophe. Who knew? At any rate, there didn't seem to be any significant problems arising from either Crow's curious aura of ill fortune, his semblance, as he called it, or his thrilling tonight. He was a lush, but he could hold his liquor, and he knew his limits well, although there was a hint of some problem that could ruin the evening. Hard to tell what it was though. After a moment's concentration, Abso had a fix on it, and knew how to make the events more palatable. She casually moved to one end of the punch table and flipped up one side of the fancy tablecloth, revealing a cheap, utilitarian folding table underneath. With a pair of swift motions, most legs on the end were shed halfway through by her horn, the noise of rent aluminium unnoticed over the music. With the tablecloth flipped back down, there was no sign that anything was wrong. Abso then reached under the table and pushed the concealed cooler containing more ice and jugs of punch a little further toward the damaged side, then propped herself up on the edge of the table and set the punch bowl a few inches closer to the intact hand. Perfect. Let's see. Let me just read this a little bit again. Oh, she prepared a trap. I see. Crow and Gerda had noticed her adjustments, but she replied to their questioning looks with only a amused grin before sauntering off elsewhere, Swy in tow. Seeing a place with a good view of what was to come, the pair of quadrupeds found themselves drawing close to the pair of military officers in the room, distinguished by their choice to wear dress uniforms instead of normal finery. Winter Schnee was scowling, not an unusual occurrence on Abso's experience, and the Pokemon arrived with an earshot just in time to hear her companion, obviously General Ironwood, mentioned so many times over the last week, ask why. "Is there something troubling you, Specialist?" "Isn't anything of importance, sir. Nothing you need to concern yourself over." Ironwood chuckled, taking a sip from his own cup of punch. "We are at a social function, Specialist. It's perfect time to bring up the unimportant things. What's the problem?" Winter sighed, a touch irritably. I'm just trying to remember if I was that much of a giggling twit when I was 17, she said, gesturing toward the cluster of laughing partygoers. I would say not. As I recall, you were too busy indulging your superiority complex to giggle about anything at that age. I would answer casually. Exactly, I was never... Winter paused as she pronounced her superior's words. As you say, sir. He smiled at her indulgently. Just look at this. Look at it as proof of how far you have come, Snee. Back then, you would have called them giggling twits to their faces, and now you would still do it. But you would do them the kindness of disguising your meaning with a few extra syllables. Iron would ignore the irate look with a satisfied smile. So what is it about that particular cluster of gigglers, twit or otherwise, that has you questioning your personal history? Winter made a noise that seemed like for a pulse sigh and growl, and glared towards the students, and towards the refreshment tables, and the huntsman standing there. They have been asking me some rather suggesting questions about my relationship, she sneered, letting the last word drip with sarcasm. Rid of all people grow Darwin. Even ignoring the fact that the man is literally old enough to be my father. You may recall his twin sister's daughter is the same age as my own sister. Why is that so many people see two individuals who openly despise each other and assume that it simply has to be sexual tension? No, it's not. I guess this is questioning the shippers. Iron didn't look at her, instead following her gaze to the refreshment table and clearly enjoying the view as Professor Goodwich undulated her way across the room towards the spin. I couldn't tell you, specialist. Officer snickered. That seemed to finally get the attention of the pair of soldiers. Ironwood stared at her, evidently unsure how to proceed. Winter, on the other hand, took it in stride. Ah, hello, Absol. Allow me to introduce General Ironwood, my commanding officer and headmaster of Atlas Academy. General, this is Absol, the individual I have mentioned in my reports. She cleared her throat, and the more subdued voice continued. And Zwei. He is, Xiaolong's. Zwei barked cheerfully. Bark! Absol briefly considered offering a paw to the general to shake like humans typically did upon meeting someone new, but decided that her prominent claws would likely make the gesture somewhat less friendly than intended. Instead, she bowed slightly, dipping into a rough approximation of a curtsy. Clearly nonplussed, Ironwood nodded at her in return. Ah, hello, Absol. It's a pleasure to finally meet you. Absol simply smiled at him politely, knowing that there wasn't really any point in speaking up. He wouldn't understand her at all, after all. General Ironwood, I don't know who is talking, a new voice said from behind the officers, as someone unfamiliar to Absol walked up. She was a red-haired girl in a pale green party dress and a pink ribbon in her hair. Oh. I know who she is. She also had a pair of armored Atlas soldiers, standing at attention at her side. She was certainly either a VIP or a related one. Ah, hello, Penny. I trust you are having a good time. The girl smiled up at the tall soldier, her eyes shining. Oh yes, General Ironwood, I'm having fantastic time. Thank you for allowing me to attend. She turned her wide eyes towards Absol, smiling about farting. Is this your friend, General? I would cough lightly into his hand. Clearly trying to buy time to think of a proper answer. This is Absol. Specialist Snee was just introducing us. Absol smirked at the uncomfortable officer, amused by his clear case of cognitive dissonance, as he attempted to treat the furry quadruped just like another partygoer. It wouldn't have been nearly as amusing to see someone act like that back home, but in a world with only mundane animals and grim, it was clearly a new experience for him, so she was willing to cut him some slack. She turned her attention to Penny, stepping forward and repeating her curtsy at the young lady. "Salutations!" the girl greeted with an odd little wave. "Are you the visitor specialist Nee met on the mission alongside husband Braven, husband Xiaolong, and Team Juniper?" Absol nodded politely as her mind raced, fitting details together. Armed escorts, personally knows the head of the Atlas military, odd word choice and pronunciation, overuse of titles to go with names, has no scent but metal and oil, makes a very faint whirring noise with every move. Well, looked like Absol was meeting the local equivalent of Porygon. Oh my god! Now that I think about it, it's true! Literally. I never thought about it that way. Fortunately, it seemed to be intended letting her to be a real person, just like how to reach your Pokemon were encouraged to develop as individuals back on Earth. That was a good sign. Sensational! Penny said, unaware of where Absol's thoughts for taking her. "I am so happy to meet you. Xenarive has introduced me to that Store Spin, and with their permission I will be permitted to accompany further missions to locate." She paused suddenly, and turned sorrowful eyes on Ironwood. "I apologize, General. I spoke of restricted subjects in public forum." "It's fine, Penny. No harm done. We'll talk about that more another time, when we can introduce you to the others. Team Juniper are quite good friends with Miss Rose and her teammates, so I'm sure you will get along with them." "How wonderful! More friends!" Penny looked delighted at the prospect, and Absol couldn't help but smile at her earnest nature. Suddenly, Absol heard a growl from her side, and turned to see Ch25 staring at something out on the dance floor. Her polite smile turned to eager grin. Showtime! Ironwood, Schnee, and Penny all looked at the corgi with confusion before following his gaze. They saw a quartet of young men in unexpectedly fitted suits moving into the floor with purpose, though obviously without dancing their minds. "The illustrious Team Cardinal," Ironwood said, his voice flat and amused. "Why am I not surprised?" The four approached Joan and Pyrrha, and the burlier leader interrupting their dance with a sneering comment that Absol and her companions, with the possible exception of Ch25, were too distant to hear. Joan visibly brought down his nerves and said something in return, and Winchester reached out to grab the blonde by the lippers. The step behind him, Pyrrha's eyes were narrowing dangerously. Noah and Ren were approaching quickly to reinforce their teammates. "I do not understand," Penny said, tilting her head as she watched the proceedings. "For what purpose are Team Cardinal behaving this way?" Winter sighed irritably at the shameful display before trying to explain it to the innocent gynoid. "Unfortunately, there are some people who are sufficiently insecure that they cannot truly enjoy themselves unless they are making someone else miserable." Absol smiled at the explanation, not taking her eyes off the growing confrontation. Events were proceeding properly, and in order to keep that way, she reached out to gently stop Ch25 from darting in to protect his backup treat givers. She cleared her throat, gaining the attention of Dog, Soldier, and Robot alike. The dark type meaningfully looked towards the refreshment tables. Unaware of the brewing trouble on the dance floor, the blue-haired pretty boy Absol had often seen flirting with girls all over the campus was backpedaling, trying and failing to appease an irate girl with the dark purple hair and lavender dress, one of the visitors from Shade Academy. Shade Academy, huh? Absol wasn't sure what he had done to anger her, but it really didn't matter. He ran out of the room back away, bumping into the punch table with enough speed that he lost his balance and fell back against it. Originally, nothing would have come from it, but the table skidding an inch, and some punch chopping out to make a small stain on the tablecloth. With Absol's adjustments, though, things ended up a little more dramatic. When the customer wannabe fell against the table, the pair of legs that side suddenly snapped off entirely, and his full weight dropped down on the end. The cooler underneath served as a fulcrum, and the punch bowl made for an excellent payload. The bowl arced into the air beautifully, the glass catching the light just enough to sparkle, and the punch turning the light delightful rosy hue for a second. And then it dropped perfectly and caught in Winchester's thick head from behind, spattering him and his teammates with over a gallon of sticky, fruit-flavored syrup water in the process. John, being in the right position to see the ballistic refreshments coming, had managed to step back just before the impact, instinctively pulling Pyrrha along to get her out of the splash zone. Upso couldn't help but grin as she saw that his impulsive act of assistance had resulted in pulling the invictable girl in her clothes against her chest, drawing forth a brilliant blush from both of them. Just as planned. Dark, damn it! I love being me! Upso sighed triumphantly. That's probably from a, yeah, that's from a comic, okay. Can we open this up? Just to be sure. I mean, you can open it on your own self if you are here. I'm not gonna pull this on the screen because it was made by someone else. It is a comic. She saw the unconscious looks Ironwood and Schnee were giving her, as well as Crow and Goodwitch, both staring at her from across the room, and simply gave them a small grin in return. Specialist? Penny asked, frowning thoughtfully at the punch-soaked bullets on the floor. I am confused. Watching people suffer misfortune like that would normally generate feelings of concern and sympathy from me, but in this instance, all I feel is satisfied. I don't understand. Winter turned her attention away from Upso to give Penny a reassuring smile. Congratulations, Penny. You have discovered a Schadenfreude. Schadenfreude. Is that what you mean when you are smiling on someone else's misfortune? Let me just see. What is that? Yeah, it's that. A pleasure derived by someone from another person's misfortune. Yeah, that's probably German as well. Also languidly nodded to the trio of bipeds before sauntering off, twittering at her side and panting in a way that sounded remarkably like laughter. The evening was warm, with just enough of a breeze to be comfortable. Ramnan's shattered moon set high in the sky. Upso strolled across the campus with her canine companion, still reveling in the plan perfectly executed. Even with the interference surrounding Beacon, things had gone without a hitch. The Pokémon had decided to catch some fresh air, as the cloying smell of sugar and an artificial fruit flavoring had started to get a little overwhelming, especially after Cottonelle had stormed out, dripping more punch whenever they went. Well, if they hadn't wanted public humiliation and high dry cleaning bills, they shouldn't have gotten on Upso's bad side. And if they didn't want to end up on Upso's bad side, they shouldn't have called her a mutant moth and trying to pull her tail while she first arrived on campus. Idiots! The Warden-in-Chief was lucky he didn't lose fingers in the attempt. If it wasn't for his aura, he would have. Upso stopped suddenly as the disaster sense pulsed. Something was seriously wrong, but it was only faint. The feeling faded in and out, and at times seemed to blend with the school's air of constant doom. Something dangerous, something imminent, yet distant. The officer recognized the contradiction of feelings. She had gotten those sort of premonitions before. They meant events were occurring that wouldn't cause disaster immediately or directly, but that would eventually result in something terrible. The problem was that such things were really hard to pin down with her power at best of times, and the school's interference was making it worse. Ch25 whined faintly, looking up at which obvious concern, but then he perked up, staring off into the distance. The corgi surged forward on his stubby legs, yapping loudly as he went. With a frown, Usopp followed, easily catching up and pacing the tiny dog. She had no idea what had caught his attention, but she somehow doubted it was a squirrel. At the foot of the massive tower that contained, among other things, Ozpin's office. Her faith in Ch25 was proven well-paced. A booth was sticking out of the decorating hedges next to the main entrance, and its wearer, mostly hidden by foliage, was frighteningly still. Thankfully, Usopp and Ch25 found the armored guard to still be breathing, though firmly unconscious. And there was a faint but distinctive smile in the air, leading along the hedgerow to the guard's post outside the door, and then inside. Okay, we are going back to the original happenings of the series, but this time RWBY is not here to find the intruder. It's Absol and Ch25. Following the trail, Absol stared at the tower's lobby, shocked. 4 more guards were scattered around the room, unmoving. One nearby had bullet holes in his armor. Bullet holes? Ch25 whined as he strutted into the room, sniffing at the guards and heading for the elevator. Deciding he had the right idea, Absol stalked forward, pausing only long enough to tug off her broad shawl and place it on the security desk as she passed. Wouldn't want to get it bloody when she found the perpetrator after all, but as she joined Ch25 at the door to the lift, she couldn't help but wonder, why was the attacker leaving this distinct scent trail of peppermint? Peppermint? Cinder smiled to herself as the virus finished uploading itself into CCT's data vault. The console screen flashed briefly with the symbol of a black chess screen, and each of the smaller workstations flickered on and showed the sigil as well. As promised, the program supplied by her benefactor hadn't even been slowed by the best firewall and antivirus software Atlas could supply. Cinder could almost congratulate Watts for his work. Now that she would even give the egomaniac the satisfaction. With the task complete, the agent of Salem removed her scroll from the port and prepared to exfoliate the building, and then froze as she heard the faint hum of the elevator. Well, she supposed things had been a little too easy getting in. Moving smoothly and silently, the would-be nearly was maiden stepped behind the receptionist's desk and dropped to one knee, keeping hidden from the elevator door. The latest update from Emerald indicated that the biggest threats to her mission, the headmasters, Brandon and Goodwitch, were still all present at the dance, along with the assurance that had taken steps, doubtless by means of her semblance. To be sure, Brandon couldn't identify them. While there were a few secondary threats not correctly accounted for, such as Ni and Xiaolong, Cinder felt confident that even they wouldn't be enough to prevent her escape. That was the only concern, since the virus was already in place. Whoever was on the elevator, they were too late. The elevator dinged. Cinder tensed. And then she stared blankly as a corgi in a bow tie paddled into the room, tail wagging and tongue lolling. The dog trotted past the desk she was using as cover, sat on the floor, and looked up at her cheerfully. Suddenly, Cinder rose from the hiding place. What? How? A flicker of movement caught her eye, and she looked up just in time to see a huge mass of white fur and black claws lunging towards her. snarling like an angry beowulf. Iron stood in the warm evening air, just outside the dance hall, frowning at his call. Is something wrong, James? Ospen asked, his cane tapping as he joined his compatriot. Possibly, the soldier hatched. One of my patrol detachments has missed their check-in, and they are transferring the radios. It might be nothing, but another squad is double timing it to their assigned position just in case. A wise precaution, Ospen said with a thoughtful nod. Where was the first unit positioned? Iron moved just towards the tower that dominated the campus. Ground floor of the CCTs. Considering how much sensitive material is in that place, I won't feel comfortable until an all clear is given. A window halfway up the tower exploded outward, a plume of flame rushing from the building as shards of glass fell to the sidewalk below. Or until I have something to shoot. The general amended, throwing his sidearm and rushing towards the tower. I mean, it's time to stop. And get some. Maybe this one. Arthur was impressed. Whoever the lady was, she was just as dangerous in a straight fight as she was skilled in infiltration. Whether with the blades and bow made of black glass she had kept pulling out from nowhere, or with the blast of flame and exploding shards, this was turning into the most intense fight Arthur had been in for quite some time. If it wasn't for the trail of disabled guards leading into the building, and the presumably nefarious purpose that put the woman here, the Pokemon would have been having fun. Arthur leaped to the side, dodging another volley of dust-infused glass, and racing forward with a quick attack, forcing the intruder to leap back to avoid the charge. She pressed her advantage, dark-type energy clinging to her claws, and managed to land a glancing blow. As the black-clad human tried to disengage and bolt to the elevator, she guessed as Pierce's suit's secondary effect wrecked her. The distortion worked with it. Absol was still having fun. Cinder was not having fun. The weird dog she had been appraised about was not a goddamn dog. It was currently fighting with all the skill and strength of a veteran huntsman, and the way it had started grinning at her halfway through the encounter was seriously disconcerting. The four maiden candidate turned to a pained stumble into a graceful sidestep, as whatever the furry thing had done wore off. Twin blades of glass manifested in her hands once more, and she wove them in defensive flourish as the beast lashed out with its claws again. Cinder successfully warded off the attack, then countered with a slash that whipped along the thing's flank and drew a jab and a snarl. Cinder leapt backwards to open the distance, fusing the blades into a bow and manifesting a trio of arrows in one smooth motion. The orange dust in the arrowheads was already glowing, and she had a clear shot. But before she could take it, there was another higher pitched snort to her side, and the freaking corgi leapt and clamped his jaws on her wrist, jerking the bow to the side just as she released. The shot went wide. One arrow passing through the window she had already blown out with a fireball when the fight began. The other two striking one pane to the left and destroying that window as well. Cursing, Cinder balled her fist and struck the meddling dog in its fuzzy belly, successfully forcing it to release her arm, but she was astounded to realize the dog had an active aura too, and it rolled with the punch and bounced to its feet, none the worse for wear. and while she had been distracted, the larger creature had launched again. Cinder was overextended and out of position. Moving with inspiration born from desperation, she checked the nearest desk with enough force to damage the vials of dust in her side pouch, and throw as much as the resulting plume of reactive material as she could into the huge valley of explosive fragments, hastily firing them at the beast in a shotgun spread. Red eyes flashed with a lost-seeing light for an instant. The monster twisted in midair, spinning in place, long legs tucking in close, and somehow it slipped into gap between the shards without touching a single one. The monster's single horn glowed with a dark aura and it spiraled towards Cinder. She tried to bring her bladed bow around to block it, but it wasn't enough, and the charged blade shattered her weapon and kept going. She took the hit cleanly, and though her aura didn't collapse, it still slammed her against the wall, hard enough to feel it. Battered, bruised, and humiliated by a corgi and whatever the other animal was. Yup, Cinder was done here. Grinding her teeth in range, she wove her will into the remaining dust, still spilling from her hip bag, and focused on altering the reaction, putting less emphasis on progressive force and more on light. The resulting burst served as the first half of a flashbang, and the pained howls of the pair of pests were music to Cinder's ears. She had already chosen her path and charged forward at top speed, passing the white furred creature and leaping for the distant window. You know why I laughed, right? But yes, there's gonna be a baby video today as well, don't worry about that. It is a long drop, but that's what landing strategies were for. Chains composed of black glass manifested in Cinder's hand, and with them, she was able to swing between the tower and one of its massive buttresses, bleeding off enough speed to dig a blade into the wall and slow herself yet further. By the time she reached the lowest floor and kicked off, she had reduced her descent to survival speeds, and merely landed hard instead of breaking bones. The flawless escape was somewhat spoiled by the dozen or so clutch click noises she immediately heard from just a few feet away. Even more laughter at that. I almost stood with his revolver leveled at the catsuit-clad woman, who apparently dropped out of the sky in front of him. Ospin and Co were flanking him, and a squad of his finest were already moving to surround her and cut off any possible escape. "Surrender," he commanded, "or don't. It won't make any difference." The woman remained kneeling on the concrete, but she raised her head slightly and smoked at the officer. Behind her domino mask, her eyes practically seemed to glow a molten yellow. There was a clatter from above, and to RWBY's astonishment, Absol leaped to the ground behind the mystery woman. Her fur was ruffled and stained with soot, and there was a long slash mark in her path along one flank, but she looked otherwise unharmed. Then suddenly the general heard a faint ding of an elevator, and the bowtie-clad corgi came scampering out of the tower's lobby, taking a position next to Absol. Wait, how did her foot dog hit the elevator door? Good question. Don't question it though. I would force himself to focus as the culprit slowly started to rise her feet. The instant of a smile never left her face, as she stared into his eyes. Every soldier tensed as she stood up, but she merely raised her hands in an attitude of surrender, and dropped a pair of grenades she had pawned. Doom! The first was a flashbang, and the noise and light sent Ironwood, Crow, and the quadrupeds reeling. It was less effective against the soldiers, whose helmets provided both flash suppression and hearing protection, but the equipment didn't do anything to help with the other grenade. The second bomb, the woman dropped for the smoke grenade, and the cloud it it spread, covered the fight area in a hurry. Nobody could risk firing. Friendly fire was far more likely than achieving something constructive. There was a ripple in the smoke, and Ironwood leveled his gun at it, but wasn't sure enough of his target to pull the trigger. As the smoke began to clear, it became obvious that he had made the right call. Osprey stood in the middle of the ring of soldiers. His cane swept out to the side as he completed a strike at the foe, who was no longer there. The other headmaster straightened up and lowered his weapon, adjusting his spectacles with an air of irritation. He mouthed something silently, shaking his head in disappointment. No, wait, he wasn't mouthing something. Ironwood just couldn't hear him over the ringing of his ears. Scowling, Ironwood looked around now that the smoke was gone, and was almost surprised to see no sign of the attacker. She had managed quite adroitly, and even as Ironwood shouted orders to his men to sound an alert and find her, he doubted that they would have any success. As his senses normalized, thank goodness for Aura, it would have taken much longer without it. The lessening pain in the general's eyes and ears allowed him to take notice of another, different assault upon his senses. What the hell was that smell? Why did everything suddenly reek of peppermint of all things? I only didn't realize he had spoken the question aloud until Crow answered him. That's why, the Huntsman said, gesturing at Absol and a Corky. They were both collapsed on the ground, both pressing over their noses. The dog was whimpering, and Absol snarled and coughed in equal measure. They looked absolutely miserable. Old bandit trick, used outside the kingdoms. The crow explained, shuffling over to look at them. Oils and essences are easy to distill and are cheap to buy. Don't put it on the scene of the crime, and tracking dogs won't be able to smell anything else. The crazy bitch must have figured these two might be able to follow her, so she took precautions. Maybe even put some on herself to cover her own scent. Mixed into the smoke bomb, Ironwood growled. Half of the campus is going to be covered, all because she told a Corky and whatever episodes might possibly be able to. Which means, Osprey said with remarkable restraint, we are dealing with someone who plans her actions out very carefully. I expect the opportunity to apprehend her tonight has passed, James. So we would be better served by determining what her intent in the CCTVs was. Furthermore, we can remove Absol once she has recovered from her ordeal, and see if she has any insight to offer. He offered the pair of dilapidated quadrupeds to look of sympathy as he added, I imagine that peppermint bomb was even worse for them, as the flashbang was for us. Alright, Ironwood sighed. The remove Absol, fine, let's just go have a look at the damage. Secure in her dorm, freshly showered and changed to remove the stench of the peppermint oil she had applied to mask her scent and cover her escape, Cinder seated. She hated not having sufficient intel. She loathed being caught off guard. She despised losing fights, and as much as it pained her to admit it, she certainly didn't find that fun. If she had dipped into the power of the maiden's mental, she would have fared better, but that would have verified beyond any doubt that to Osprey and Ironwood that this infiltration was connected to the assault on the former Four Maiden. They would obviously suspect it either way, but to confirm it for them would make things far, far worse. For that matter, if that wasn't for the ridiculous dog, she would have done better. Who the hell unlocks a Corky's aura? Well, the mission had been successful at any rate. The virus was planted, even if a lot of equipment in the CCT's terminal was wrecked by the fight. Replacing the consoles wouldn't change a thing. Speaking of, it was time to report to the Queen. The score call went through flawlessly, the virus removing the record of the transmission. Salem answered after a single ring. You were successful, the Queen of the Cream stated, not bothering with pleasantries. Cinder cleared her throat and spoke to her leader with the proper tone of subservience. Yes, Salem, there were complications, but the virus is in place and functioning. Complications. Salem said the word slowly, as if tasting the direct falsehoods. What sort of complications? Did Brown interfere? No, he didn't involve himself until the last few seconds. But there was this creature that confronted me. I don't know what it was, but... Sam didn't answer immediately, but Cinder felt a deepening of the silence on the other end of the line. Describe it. Leave nothing out. Cinder did as she was told, recounting every detail of the third being, and the battle she had with it, that she could remember. She held back nothing, even admitting that she came off the worst in the clash. There was a long, dreadful silence. Cinder, I need you to listen very, very carefully. Yes, Salem, I'm listening. The languages of Remnant are too limited to truly express how important this is. That creature must die. Do you understand me? Yes, I understand, but what is... Do not ask me what it is, or why it is important. It dies. As quickly as you can manage. You will need time to prepare, but the sooner it dies, the more pleased with you I will be. Your wish is my will, Your Majesty. But the creature associated itself with Brahman and Ospin. Targeting it will definitely draw the attention, which will put my primary mission at risk. This is your primary mission now. Salem's voice boiled through the speaker with enough force that Cinder jerked the skull away. If you have to choose between killing your target and keeping your cover, you kill the beast without hesitation. Do you understand? Cinder didn't answer at first, staring into space with her eyes wide. Was Salem serious? She didn't question. She was always serious about others. I said, yes, I understand, my queen. Good. Salem's tones became more conciliatory. Now that she was certain she had gotten her point across. We have all the time in the world to acquire the maidens and the relics. Literally, all the time. But our work will become immeasurably harder if Pokemon manage to establish a presence here. Pokemon? Establish a presence here in where? Where did this Pokemon thing came from? That Cinder had never heard of them before. And what exactly did Salem mean all the time in the world to acquire the maidens? Cinder had been promised power, and now years of planning were just being discarded? Backstabbing witch. Cinder filed away to contemplate later. Salem was still talking. If you see even the slightest hint of another strange animals, I want you to inform me immediately. I don't care how many false alarms may rise. Tell me anything that may be relevant. Oh, you already have another creature to report. Yes, there is this corgi. After a brief summary of Xiaolong's unusual dog, there was another silence on the line. But this one has a more complexity rare. Does the line of Umbramere yet survive? Ma'am? While this information is interesting, this story is not what I'm concerned about. Be certain to report any other unusual and powerful animals, minerals, or vegetables. Keep up the good work. The call ended. Cinder stared at her with a score for a second. For a long time, as she considered the single strangest conversation she had ever had with her benefactor. She was still staring at the innocuous lump of plastic, and the circuits when Mercury and Emerald returned to the dorm, still in their party wear. Emerald cautiously cleared her throat, unsure of her mortal mistress's mood. Cinder, I didn't see you at the dance. Did something go wrong? Sidna put the scroll away and leaned back against the wall. Something came up. Salem sat on her throne, staring into space thoughtfully. Without a word, she rose to her feet and returned to her private quarters. She passed through an expensive sitting room and opened a long disused door, leading down the hall into a smaller chamber that was equal parts closet and a storeroom. It contained a myriad of bits and pieces collected over the centuries, things that weren't practically useful, but that she didn't want to discard. She refused to call them keepsakes or souvenirs. If anyone else had done so in her hearing, they likely would have been slowly lowered into a pit full of apathy for the trouble. Of course, that would require someone besides Salem to know of the chamber's existence. At the back of the room was a large cabinet, the kind of triptych doors that swung open to display the contents. Salem opened them now, frowning at the unexpected effort required and the annoying squeak of the hinges. She needed to come back here with some oil of one of those decades. The Black Queen of the Grim stood before the ancient painting, carefully preserved through the years. Larger than life, it was a portrait of a loving family created in simpler days. Well, most of a loving family, the father had been removed from the canvas, scorched edges surrounding the hole where his head used to be. But the mother, young and beautiful, with her snowy white hair and skin, sat with her 4 wonderful children, love and care in her eyes. And the eldest daughter's lap sat a bright-eyed Corky. What? I did not see that coming. Is Ch25 descendant of Cinder's Corky? I mean Salem's Corky? Good question. But you see that this is the end of the chapter. Great, right? I like how they are keeping the actual happenings in RWBY and taking a kinda different turn on them. Now Absolute painted a target on their back, but I don't think they're gonna get killed. Cinder is not that strong. Yeah, we know that she's strong, but she's not that strong. Not against the fully defended Pokemon. There's a lot of character development here. And I like where this is going. Actually, we haven't been in the Pokemon side. We were just in Remnant this time. Curious. Now that Dance Dance Revolution actually makes sense, the title. And the next one is gonna be somewhat close to it. If I remember correctly, it was something about movement as well. Show me your moves, yes? That sounds like we are going back to the Pokemon world. That sounds like an invitation to fight. But that's gonna be tomorrow. And because it's 5,000 words only, and the 27 is 6,000 words, the 7,000 words, there is a possibility that we can do 2 chapters, depending on my voice. But now I'm gonna end it right here. And yes, I'm gonna take a rest first. then I'm gonna record the Beyblade episode. That's gonna happen at night as well. But now I'm gonna leave. Thank you all who was here during the live reading, and thank you all for watching after this is up. If you weren't here but still watching. See you next time, tomorrow at the same time. Bye bye.